Let's be brutally honest right now. That's a big question.
I'm looking for someone who doesn't want to go to base camp, but they want to go to the very top.
Whether it's here, India, New York.
Civilization was born at happy hour.
That's what wins. That's what stands out. That's what people are interested in.
That's what I want to know.
The Hospopreneurs Podcast with James Henderson.
Hello and welcome back to the Hospopreneurs Podcast. Paul Hadida is the APAC General Manager of SevenRooms, a guest experience and retention platform for the hospitality industry. You may remember the interview with founder Joel Montaniel back at episode 131. Paul followed his passion from real estate into hospitality, acquiring and growing a cafe before moving into regional and national sales roles with Scoopon and Eatnow under the Catch Group. He then became the APAC VP at Quandoo and oversaw a team of 80 plus staff across Australia, Singapore and Hong Kong. Now, leading SevenRooms in the APAC region, Paul leverages a decade of hospitality experience and has forged partnerships with some of Australia's largest venue groups, including Merivale, Australian Venue Co and Rockpool Dining Group. Hey team, the episode today is sponsored by our friends at Access Collins. They provide comprehensive table management and end-to-end function management tools that enable you to have complete control over the entire customer journey. If that's something you'd like, please support us by supporting them at bit.ly/hospo sponsor. Hello and welcome to the show, Paul.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
No worries at all. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on, Paul. We tried to line this one up a couple of times and I'm really glad to be able to sit down with you and crank a very exciting interview out. And we actually did have Joel on quite a while ago now. I'm wondering if it was 1 or even 2 years ago. So very excited to open up an Australian angle on SevenRooms. So very, very excited to sit down with you today. You've got your own story, a unique one in itself. So yeah, really appreciate your time joining me on the program.
Yeah, thank you. I think Joel was about 18 months ago, so things have definitely changed both locally and globally with hospitality, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Well, Paul, as you know, the first question that I like to ask on the program is a crazy hospitality story or exceptional hospitality experience. I'd love to know what you've got for the program today.
I've got one that relates to sort of how I got to where I am today. It was a number of years back. The famed Tao Hospitality Group based out of the US was opening their sort of regional in Singapore. They were opening a Lavo restaurant and they were opening Marquee. And so my sort of thoughts were two ways. One, we had some clients that I needed to entertain in Singapore. And two, I was like, how am I going to get in front of these guys? Because even though I manage people and I manage a business, I have a sales at my heart. So I'm always trying to still generate business. So I sent through an inquiry on the Marquee website. They just had a contact form at the time when they were launching Singapore, just saying, hi, Paul, I need to arrange a table at Marquee and I want to bring some guests along and just wanted to get some information. And within maybe a few hours, I received a WhatsApp message because, as you know, Singapore, Hong Kong, it's all WhatsApp. Everything's WhatsApp. And I received a WhatsApp message from a gentleman. He provided his name. I won't say his name just in case I shouldn't say his name, saying, hi, my name's ABC and these are our rates, etc. And I looked at that name and I was like, where do I know that name from? I know that name. Where do I know that name from? And I don't know, maybe a couple of days later and talking to some friends, it hit me that when I was in Vegas, maybe 5, 6, 7 years before, he was one of my hosts at Tao when I went to Tao in Vegas. And so I made the connection with him. I texted him and he remembered exactly who we were. He remembered what we did and probably what we spent. I don't even want to know what we spent, but probably what we spent there. And from then on, like, I had an amazing connection and relationship with this guy. And what I thought at the time was, there's got to be a better way, right? There's got to be a better system for me. Like, when I make that inquiry, those details should have come up and he should have been the one saying to me, hey, Paul, don't I remember you? Were you not here in Vegas at that time? And what an amazing experience that would have been if that came back.
And we were having a chat before the episode, and I guess you sort of alluded to it there, but SevenRooms does do that, and anyone who's listened to the episode with Joel will know that as well. So what was it then that led you to doing what it is that you're doing now and finding Joel and SevenRooms?
Yeah, I mean, my career goes way back. I started in real estate sales, which is so far removed from what I do now. And from there, I fell out of love with that industry. And there was hospitality roots always within my family, whether it was just sort of the hospitality you had within the family or the restaurants that my parents owned at one stage of their lives and their careers. And I sort of fell into buying myself a little cafe in Paddington in Sydney. And it was a 50-seat cafe. Like, thinking back now, it was just crazy. It was a cash only business. We didn't even have an FPOS machine, and we trusted people to go across the road to the ATM if they didn't have cash on them. And from there, I realized that that was probably not a sustainable career for myself when I was getting married and wanting to have children and wanting a more regulated career. And I fell into the online world. And in that place, I worked for a bunch of different startups in group buying, in the delivery and takeaway space, and also in the two-sided traditional marketplaces for restaurant reservations. And then from there, SevenRooms was a business that I at one stage competed against, and at one stage I would always lose to SevenRooms. So I knew that there was something special there, because when we looked at that product, it was like, wow, this product is doing something that no one has ever seen before. And then when I connected with the SevenRooms team, and when I connected with Joel and the wider leadership team at SevenRooms, it was sort of a fit from the start. And that whole daunting interview process didn't feel like an interview process. It felt like a business conversation. It felt like we were connecting really well, and we had the same goals and ambitions of what we wanted to do out here. And coincidentally, I flew over to New York in the last week of February 2020 and had dinner with Joel and Kanesh, the CEO and CTO, as well as the head of international and the CRO at the time. And from there, like, it was all great. And a few weeks later, I came back to Sydney and they made me an offer. And then we all know what happened in March 2020. The world sort of, crumbled and ended and put a halt to everything and made everybody sort of realize, what are we going to do now? And is this the right thing? And so things got pushed out a little bit. And because of the way Australia was responding to the pandemic, shutting down our borders at the time, limiting the spread and being able to reopen quicker, there was a real opportunity within the Australian market compared to potentially, the US and the UK. So we took a calculated risk and we opened the market here. And the last 2 years have been crazy, to say the least.
If we take a step back and ask often what is my second question, but we've digressed to more of a background on you, my reason in doing so based on your story at the beginning there. But if we take a step back and look at why you do what you do, what is it that really drives you? It sounds like you've got a really strong background in sales, but what is it though that really sits behind that and inspires you to do what it is that you do?
When I think back to being an operator myself and seeing how antiquated those systems were, and thinking there's got to be a better way to scale hospitality businesses from 1 to 5 to 10 to 20. And that's what I love coming in every day and doing, and feel like I'm making a change and feel like I'm really on the operator side and working with them rather than just trying to sell them a piece of software that's going to maybe help their business or not. I really believe that it makes some massive differences for hospitality businesses. And I truly love the product that we sell in there. And when I see the impact it has on those businesses, it's really rewarding for me.
Without risking moving down a question thread that looks at COVID, because I try to stay away from too much of it on the show. What I actually want to ask you about is, if we look beyond these things and there are these exogenous shocks on the industry, what is it that you see the future of hospitality being with this sort of tech and that experience? What does hospitality look like to you?
I think there's a couple of things. So firstly, I think traditional open a restaurant and have people come and dine and go home has changed, and it has to be multifaceted. So we call it the 360-degree restaurant. So takeaway, delivery, in-service dining, potentially take home and finish at home kits. You have to offer your customer everything and have every angle, because the world changes so quickly, and one day restaurants are open, the next day they're closed. So they need to be prepared there. The adoption of technology and utilizing data is the key to that success on all those facets.
How are you seeing data being used by some of your customers?
So in a couple of ways. So understanding the data and knowing who the customer is and what the customer wants, what the value of that customer is to the operator. Those are really key parts. And then when you have that data and you understand the customer, servicing that customer either in venue or through takeaway delivery by giving them what they want and giving them that exceptional experience, as well as then marketing back to them in a direct way rather than a generic way. So an automated marketing solution that really brings to me what I want to see on a daily or monthly basis and what I want to be served up, rather than a generic, here's all the specials that we have for the month.
To elaborate on that a little bit more, with the data that you're providing for your clients, are there any businesses that you're doing it in a way that you didn't expect, that you're like, oh, that's a really interesting way to use the data that we're giving you?
Yeah, look, they're understanding things like how many visits the customers are coming to, how often they're coming. We integrate with multiple POS platforms, both Australia and globally, understanding the spend habits of the customers. Two things, so be able to tailor what they give the customer when the customer arrives to the venue, as well as what the marketing that they serve to them. And that's all done through the system, which is the beauty of it. And a lot of it is automated.
Now, we have opened up a lot more about what Seven Rooms is and the background in Joel's episode. So for you today, Paul, I'm interested in looking behind that, and with your experience in the industry, owning a cafe and sales and looking at hospitality on a macro level, and particularly in the Australian market. You've talked about this 360-degree business. What do you see success looking like for hospitality businesses today?
Every business is different. So I think that firstly, the operators, they build and they know what they want from success, whether that's purely revenue, whether it's growth in outlets, so growing, the number of locations or the number of brands. I think that changes between operator to operator. We see customers that see success of just repeat business is really important. A new customer is so much harder to find than an existing customer, and getting that existing customer to come back. Those are things that are really important to people at the minute.
How do you help to drive that for your clients?
Everything that I've just sort of spoken about, specifically around the marketing, so that's all automated with SevenRooms. So once the information and the data is in SevenRooms, so you've captured my reservation, you know that I'm a vegan, you know that when I've come, I've spent $150 per person, and you know that I come 3 times a month. All that information sits on my profile within SevenRooms and gets automatically tagged, right? So there'll be a tag in the system that says I haven't been for 60 days that will trigger an automated email, curated email that the operator has curated within SevenRooms that goes out to everybody that hasn't been within 60 days or 90 days, whatever the win-back campaign is, as an example.
How do you find customers respond to having all this data held about them? I know that, we could broaden that to so many other industries and platforms that their data is being captured on. How have they responded to platforms like yours doing so?
So we don't have a sort of a market-based solution or a platform where we send stuff from SevenRooms, right? So if it's John's Pizzeria, they're utilizing our software, but the marketing is coming from John's Pizzeria, and that operator owns all their data. So the customer has opted in when they've made their reservation or they've made their online order. So they've chosen to receive marketing from that specific operator. So there's no issue there. And if they don't want it, then they opt out and that comes clean off the database.
You're able to, I guess, wipe your hands clean of any potential issue there, because obviously privacy is a really big one at the moment that's, being discussed globally. I'm glad to hear your answer. It sounds like you might have been asked that one before there, Paul.
I mean, and that's part of the industry. So we're the facilitator, right? So that goes into our software. But ultimately, that data is not our data, it's the operator's data.
I'd like to know, what is it that you're looking at or learning about? What is it that you're exploring at the moment? I'd like to get a little more abstract with you. So what is it that sits behind the work that you do that you're drawing inspiration from in your work? And then I'm going to ask you a bit more about what it is that you do. We're going to elaborate on that for listeners.
I think at the moment, we're really lucky. We work with amazing, when I say customer, the restaurant's my customer and our customer. We work with amazing operators. The biggest challenge that we face as SevenRooms at the moment is very similar to what the operators are facing, and that's staff shortage. We don't have a staff shortage, but we have a number of roles open, and it's a challenging market to hire people in. And that's what I work on a lot. I trust my people. I've got an amazing team of account managers, of salespeople, and of people that sort of work with the operators on a daily basis. And I trust them completely. And I try to spend a lot of time trying to find the right people to bring in to be able to support the growth that we're having here.
So beyond an operational perspective, from a strategic angle, are there other businesses that you're looking to, maybe in other industries, that you think that's something really interesting that they're applying? I wonder if we could do something like that, but applied in our own way.
It's a little bit different to the other industries. I think that hospitality is a little bit further along. When I look at maybe beauty, for example, I spent a bit of time sort of working and consulting with some beauty startups. It's still very far behind where hospitality is, and hospitality still feel like it's far behind retail and tech there. So maybe the AI stuff and looking at how we can integrate that more and how that looks in the future. Contactless order and pay, we know that's huge. We know that that's a part of life and here to stay. And how do we engage better with that? And how do we have that, within one whole platform? There's some great companies doing stuff locally as well as globally there too.
Anyone that you want to mention or not?
I don't mind. The Me and You guys and the Mr. Yum guys, they've got great teams, great product, and they're doing really well. And, we've consulted and chatted a bunch of times to see, how potentially we can look at doing things.
Funnily enough, both of those businesses have been guests. We had Kim, the TO, a number of episodes back, I think maybe even 100 ago. And Stephen Permutica was on. He's been on twice. So both of those companies, for listeners out there, if you're interested, also on the show. Paul, what innovations or innovative techniques have you seen in the industry? And I know we've been focusing a bit more on the retail end of hospitality, maybe food and food tech, or if you're looking anywhere adjacent or along the supply chain. What is it that you've seen that's been innovative, or even trends could be product trends for the end user?
I think menu management, menu selection is really challenging and really key. I think you talk about what's happening now with supply chains. Lettuce is the topic of the month at the moment. So reinventing how you plate up stuff and what you get onto the menu. Again, SevenRooms can sort of connect there because you know what guests like and what guests don't. So if you can't stock your existing menu, what are the alternatives and how do you do that? I think the whole fake meat and that sort of area is really interesting, and there's a lot happening there. There's a lot of startups trying to make breakthroughs there. Those are ones that are really interesting at the moment.
And on the alternative meat, we had a previous guest in that industry too. I was interested though this week thinking about lettuce. Obviously everyone is, but whether we could get into vertical farming for lettuce. I don't know if there's a listener out there who's doing that or doing something really cool in that space, but they'd be laughing now for sure, being able to grow lettuce in an urban environment.
Surely we should be happy that we're complaining about the price of lettuce rather than whether we can open or not.
Absolutely. Totally with you on that. Paul, I'm thinking about how you might apply creativity in your own way. Obviously, you've got the global business and then you're applying it from an Australian perspective. And if you could take us through your own domain, what you look after through SevenRooms, and then how you apply a creative skill set to strategize there.
Basically, I look after the commercial operations in APAC. So anything commercial within the business here. So sales, customer success and account management, and basically all the operations and the people that we have out here. And we have a really amazing global playbook. We call it a global playbook where there's certain processes and the way things work globally. As you say, a restaurant in Sydney operates differently to a restaurant in Dublin. So how do we get the best out of the system in the markets? What we've found really successful is probably 90% of our staff locally have all come within hospitality at some point in their lives. So they've been either in the kitchen, on the floor, in the bar, or the reservations team or marketing team. So they understand hospitality. It's not foreign. The terms are not foreign. So it's a much easier bridge that we have with the customers. And often or not, they've worked major hospitality groups around the world. So they have really good insights and really understand how they can apply the software to those restaurants.
Paul, being the GM, you're obviously absorbing a lot of information, a lot of data, and being an inherently data-driven business, there must be even more data that you're looking at. What information and data are you looking at to make your own strategic decisions?
We look at all different data. So data on what types of operators and restaurants see value in our solution and our software. So that gives us, a really good idea of who we should be approaching. Understanding which of our people are doing well in what areas. Again, so when we're hiring, we can look at the kind of profile that we want to look at, as well as if any of our people are struggling with any aspects, we can look at data to see what we can do to help them and support them and to grow them.
How do you actually do that internally? That's a question that a lot of businesses are asking, particularly with a work from home or semi-work from home environment. What are you looking at to manage your teams?
On a sales side, it's easy to look at results, but it's more than just results. Sometimes the results don't come even though the effort and the activities are put in there. Perfect example is we use a software called Gong, which basically records every conversation or every Zoom interaction that we have throughout the whole global business, right? So if we've got a really successful account executive that's selling in London, my sales guys can go into Gong, watch their Zoom recordings to pick up points and tips on what they're doing. Or on the customer success side, if we have a really challenging customer that is having issues with the system, etc., our customer success team can go on and review those to find out potentially what the issues are and how we solve them, or for some of our good ones to look at potentially reaching out and saying, hey, I think I've got the solution for you with that customer. And also our sales managers and CS leaders, they're able to train and work with people, especially through, new hires and onboarding. I was in there the other day just watching a review of one of our new account executives, And you can make comments within the system. It was like, you need to do a little bit more discovery here, or this would be great if you asked these questions here, and we could have found out more about their business here, and this is where you could have talked about the reservation widget.
What do you think really drives a successful career in sales? A lot of your career has been in sales. How would you describe what's required to be successful?
I think there's a few. I mean, salespeople are driven by success and commissions and performance. Some people are just driven purely by commissions and performance. Others are driven intrinsically by wanting to be the number one performer, whether it's in a market or a company. But I've always found that to be successful, it's about, if you can help that customer, I always say operator because it's our customer, but if you can help the customer and you can solve the problem that the customer has, that's truly as rewarding as you can get.
I mean, how do you then apply that practically? How would you describe that to someone in your team?
If they're struggling to hit their quota or their target, just take a step back and look at, hey, remember that restaurant that we started working with 6 months, look at what they're doing now versus what they did now, and look at the impact that you've had on that business. That sort of brings them back to reality and helps them focus on what they need to do and where they need to get to.
How do you handle competitors in the same space? There are obviously a lot that are dealing there, but how do you actually look at that? I've had a number of different answers to this question, but I'm wondering what yours is.
I think competition is good, and I think ultimately it's good for the customer, and that's the operator. And if people are doing something good, let them go. Good on them. I don't have a problem with competition. I love it. It should push you. It should make you better. It should make our product better and their product better. And healthy competition is good.
And yeah, I've had a number of, some people are like, stay in your lane. Some people.
I think it's great, and never, like, one thing you can ask anyone that's ever been managed by me. If you ever say anything bad about a competitor, then it's the worst thing that you can do.
And I totally support that myself. I agree. I think competition's great. Maybe that's the economist in me thinking that a lot of competition's good, certainly good for the consumer. And in the world that we live in, there's a lot that shakes things up. On the note there of shaking things up and adjacent businesses is what I'm thinking about. But outside of your niche, who's doing things well that are in the hospitality space? They don't have to necessarily be in tech, but maybe somewhere close to you, but not close enough that you'd think, oh, that could be an area of development for our business. Who's doing things in an interesting way that you're looking at? Maybe new products or processes or...
Me personally, so I come from a background where I spent like 4 years or 5 years at Catch. So Catch and Scoopon and Eatnow, etc. And this is totally, there's no competition. It's not related, but it's within, I think, hospitalities. I see those milk run. I mean, I live sort of close to Bondi, and I see milk run bicycles everywhere. I haven't used them yet, but I'm tempted to because I see it everywhere. They must be doing something right. They've got great funding. They've got what I've read on the founder looks amazing. So I think that's an interesting space that's really growing. And it's still hospitality, but maybe not hospitality. And maybe it's more retail.
Yeah. But I guess part of what I try to do through this show is open the minds of listeners. Some people do already have their minds more open and they're aware of these lateral applications of these things. And that's part of what we do to cross-pollinate that knowledge and information across not just hospitality on the retail end, but anywhere along the food supply chain or beverage ecosystem. Like I'm trying to cover the whole thing. So I appreciate you mentioning something similar but not directly related. So it is a good answer, Paul. So thank you for sharing that. Do you have a resource, or classically people are like, oh, what's your favorite book or things like that? I'm not really asking specifically that. I'm looking for places that you look for information or people that you go to make sure that you continue to stay on the pulse.
I'm a LinkedIn person, so I use LinkedIn very heavily, and I network on there, and I meet people all the time, and I connect with people either in the similar space or industry or that I find interesting. And from there, I've found some great people that I've had great connections with, and I go to old mentors and old people that I've worked for if there's sort of inspiration that I need.
So if someone wants to be the GM of a business, someone earlier on in their career, maybe they've just come across this show, or maybe they're a little bit later on and they're like, oh, I want to do what Paul does. How can they do that?
So you've got to start from the bottom. I've got 2 mottos, and again, anyone that's ever worked for me would have heard these mottos. So there's 2 mottos. One is success buys freedom, and I got that from an old manager of mine. So success buys freedom. So prove yourself, earn yourself, and the freedoms will come and the opportunities will open for you. And to lead by example. So I've never expected anybody, within my team or wherever I am to be able to do something that I can't do or that I'm not able to support them with. And I lead by example on the sales side, on the CS side, on the business side, and for our business.
Two great quotes from you there, Paul. Moving on to kind of the latter end of the episode, you mentioned hiring was something that you're focused on at the moment, but outside of that, or I mean, maybe it's a big challenge of yours, but what is it that is causing you friction and is a challenge for you in your line of work now?
I don't find friction. It's not challenges. It's more, we're a startup. We're growing internationally and globally. We're growing like crazy. So you've got those growing pains. And I thrive on that because I don't want to be sort of siloed in a 5,000 plus workforce where I just have to do the same thing every day. So it's looking at, how we do things, how I operate with the US and the UK. So sometimes I have meetings at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. in the morning and 8 o'clock at night. So those are challenges, but it's not really friction.
Yeah, I guess those growing pains and that's the challenge there. What needs to change sociologically that you see? And I mean, if we take a step back and you see some areas of development in, let's go back to retail, because that's where a lot of your customers are, or your customers are focused on the retail end. What do you think should or needs to change from that perspective?
Yeah, I think on the consumer side, and when I say that, I talk about myself going into a restaurant. I can't have the expectation of what I had 3 or 4 years ago. Things have changed. Operators have been through hell and back to be able to provide what they provide now, the services and their products. And I think as consumers, we need to respect that, understand that things that took maybe 5 minutes, the entree coming out or a drink coming out within 5 minutes, might take 8 minutes or 9 minutes, however long it is. And I think that we have to be appreciative of the service and cut some slack and give these operators a chance to really wow us rather than having an expectation.
That is a good shout. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of green staff members out there too. So yeah, anyone out there who's not in the retail end, yeah, it can be a bit slow at the moment. So yeah, it's a good point there, Paul. Ultimately, where do you see SevenRooms being? Like, what does success look like for the business?
Our customers are our success. So as long as they're growing and their businesses are growing and they're seeing value from our software, that's success. But on a business side, we're expanding throughout the region. So we're growing our teams in Australia. We started growing our teams in Hong Kong and Singapore. And it's really an exciting time of growth. There's a lot of product innovation sort of intertwined with that will come sort of in the second half of the year of the work that we're doing in the first half.
Thank you for sharing that, Paul. I do just have one last question for you on the program today, and that's, who would you like to hear on the show?
I think you should get Danny Millam from Milk Run. Obviously, I mentioned that as one that I was following. I'd love to listen to that and hear him talk. He's got a great story to tell.
Perfect. I'd love to interview Danny. Thank you very much for joining me on the show today, Paul. It's been a pleasure having you on, and I'm very excited to see where SevenRooms heads in the future.
Thanks, and it took us a while to get here, so it was really great. And yeah, wish you all the best with the show.
This program is hosted by James Henderson. Voiceovers were by Angus Brennan and Shim Phelan. Thanks to our distribution team, and a special thanks to you for tuning in every week. This program was produced by H Media. We'll see you soon.